I'm sure you remember my friend from our last video. She came to visit my house for Shabbat, had no idea why I was doing the things I was doing, and more importantly, why I was not doing the things that I was not doing, why I could not turn off a light switch, why I couldn't play with my computer, etc., etc., etc. Well, today I'm going to give her a little bit more understanding in Shabbat Made Simple, Part 2. Today we're going to speak about a new concept, perhaps a new word you've never heard of before, called the Melachot. That word is absolutely critical. That is the fundamental word that will help us describe what we are allowed to do and what we are not allowed to do on Shabbat. The Melachot are 39 specific creative processes. In the previous video, we spoke about the idea that on Shabbat, you are not allowed to create. There are 39 specific processes that are referred to as Melachot, and in the singular, each one is referred to as a Melacha. They are derived, interestingly, from the construction of the Mishkan. If you don't know what a Mishkan is, it's the tabernacle, and if you still don't have any idea what I'm talking about, that was the temple built in the desert by the command of God, by Moses and the Jewish people. This temple was actually a tent, but not a tent the way you and I think of a tent. Its walls were actually made out of cedar wood, covered in solid gold. It was a magnificent structure, perhaps the most beautiful of its time, and it's called the Mishkan. But today we're not speaking about the Mishkan. Instead, we're speaking about the Melachot, the steps that it took to build this Mishkan. And the fact that it's derived from the Mishkan is not as important as understanding that these steps are broken down into three basic categories. The three categories we've mentioned in the previous video. The first category is food. Food is only the first category. The second category is clothing. And the third category is shelter. These are the three basic human needs, and on Shabbat, we're not allowed to do any of the 39 steps it takes to go from God's beautiful creation to food that we can eat, clothing that we can wear, and shelter that we can live in. Now, if you really want to be an expert in the 39 Melachot, if you really want to know and understand the laws of Shabbat, remember these numbers: 13, 11, 7, 5, and 3. You add them all up, you get 39. By coincidence, I guess nothing in the world is coincidence, these happen to be the prime numbers between 3 and 13. Why should we remember these numbers? Well, there are actually 13 steps to go from a sheep created by God to the beautiful dress and hat you see on your right. We'll learn about them in another video, but for right now, just understand that there are 13 steps in weaving clothing. There are 11 steps in going from a beautiful field to this delicious garlic roll that you see on your right. There are 7 steps it takes in making this beautiful jacket. Going from a cow or a sheep to the jacket you see on the right takes 7 specific individual steps. There are 5 steps in building shelters. Anything from this tent you see here to a mansion, there are 5 basic principal steps. And then there are 3 others that are not related to any of the above. We'll speak about all of these in individual videos. Bottom line is, there are 39 individual processes or steps to create woven clothing, food, leather clothing, shelter, from God's creation till you have the final object that you see in front of you. Warning: these processes have not changed over time. Since the day that God created the world, until the day that they made the Mishkan, until today, it still takes 13 steps to create woven clothing. It still takes 11 steps to make food, etc., etc. The only thing that has changed is that we've introduced machines into the process, that these machines can do a lot of these steps for us. But the bottom line is, the steps remain exactly the same. Finally, a couple notes you should know. In order for it to be creating, it requires two things: intention and action. Action without intention and intention without acting are not considered creating. And the other thing you should keep in mind is that it is still prohibited even if you are not actually creating, even if you're not making a dress, even if you're not making a leather coat, even if you're not making a garlic roll. The individual process that it takes in order to make those things is still prohibited, even as it stands alone from the other processes. And number two, even if it is only similar to the original process, to the melacha, it is still prohibited. With all of this in mind, we are ready to go in more depth in understanding each of the 39 melachot, each of the 39 creative processes that it takes in order to go from God's magnificent creation to the objects that we need in order to survive in it. Until we have the opportunity to look at these in depth, I wish each and every one of you a Shabbat Shalom.